Hello, I'm Alexander, and I want to welcome you to a transformational Camino with Kath Connolly and myself in October of 2015. The Camino has become, for me, one of the world's great mysteries and true deep energies of transformation. And let me tell you what I mean by this, because I know that many people today are talking about the Camino and they're describing it as a Christian walk. It is that. And we know that the Christian layer of this walk began in the 9th century, somewhere in the 800s. And at one point in the Middle Ages, we know that over 1 million people a year made this pilgrimage across Europe, across Spain, to a place in the northwest of Spain called Santiago de Compostela, where the belief is that the tomb of the Apostle James lies. Well, that's one deep and true level of the Camino, but it's far more than this. We know from archaeological evidence that this walk has been something that people have been drawn to going back to at least 6,000 BCE. That's 8,000 years ago, and it may even be older than that. We also know that the first human settlement on the European continent is along this line of today what's called the Camino. And we also know that there is suggestion that history along this line goes back 800,000 years. So what all of this means to me is that when we say we're going to go walk this ancient pilgrimage route called the Camino, we are going to be walking in the steps of millions and millions, perhaps hundreds of millions of people for millennia who have set an intent around growth and transformation. And the story of growth and transformation that each person has brought perhaps has been for a different reason. There are Celtic goddess shrines. There are shrines dedicated to Venus. There are dolmen standing stones, phallic imagery that lines the Camino. There's certainly this story of walking to the tomb of St. James. But what binds all of these together is that each person was walking along an earth energy that was leading them to the deepest place inside of themselves. And that's really what I'm inviting you to. You are free to develop your story, your myth, if you will, for your Camino. But what I see that we're all walking upon are the deep earth energies. I believe from my own experience and now from my research that here is an earth line, a line of earth and sky and water that leads us to the deepest place in ourselves. So this Camino is perhaps a little different in that, yes, we certainly will be observing Christian sites. We will be bowing to the particular goddess sites that we find. We also will be noting the Celtic standing stones. But mostly, we're going to be with the deep mystery of nature herself and the energies that she brings to each one of us in this process we call transformation. Now, who are your leaders? And although leader to me is a word I would step away from, who are your guides? Kath Connolly and I, and besides a love of pilgrimage, what she and I really bring from years now of our working together is this desire to hold a space that we called a space of freedom and safety, so that each one of us can best touch the healing energies of the earth and access them in the cleanest, most deep way possible. We believe that when we are walking in a place where I can extend to myself and to each other the desire for each of us to be the truest face of love, that in that place, that spirit along with earth helps us do our work. One of the beautiful words that I learned along the Camino is this phrase, from an ancient language. We actually think it's a mixture of Latin and Gallegos, the Galician language. And this word is ultreia. Ultreia is a word that we pilgrims have often said to each other on a difficult day. Maybe it's an internally difficult day, maybe it's a physically difficult day, maybe it's difficult because we just met somebody in a bar, or the innkeeper, whoever, who wasn't particularly gracious in themselves at that moment. And so one of us as a pilgrim would come up to the other and just gently speak in our ear, ultreia. What that word has come to mean for us is meet the moment with joy. Can you imagine a practice of walking with 11 other people in an attitude of spirit, freedom, and safety, where we really wish the highest good for each other? And though none of us can do the walk for another, none of us can take away the trial and the yearnings and the pain of growth, what we can promise each other is presence and that soft whisper in the ear on those difficult days, ultreia. What would it be like to be part of that community, standing upon earth that has been hallowed by people's desire to grow for millennia? Now, the journey that we're going to take in October is going to start just west of Lyon. In fact, we will gather in the old city of Lyon and move from Lyon to a place of rest and retreat for 2 days and 2 nights, somewhere just near Hospital de Abigo. From there, we will begin walking. And our walk, I would say, each day, we're looking at somewhere 18 to 22K a day. There may be a few days that are a bit more. There'll be a couple of days a bit less. But as we walk, each night we'll have a different inn, or what's called a casa rural, which will be our home for the evening. And the reason that we are choosing these small inns and rural houses is because they provide us the sheltering for us to come together in quiet sharing and ritual if we wish. This Camino is your Camino, but it's made in what we hope will be the holy company of good and true friendship. And so ritual work is offered, not required, not an obligation, but an invitation. Lastly, what Kath and I bring to this Camino that I'm not aware that any of the others I've heard speak of, we are focused from this very moment now, long before we walk, on how we return. To go to Santiago and then to go further and to end up at the sea in the old village of Murcia. That's not the end, that's simply the turnaround. And the longest part of the Camino begins at the turnaround. It begins as you begin to physically move back through the space to your home, but even more, emotionally and spiritually and psychically. And again, Kath and I can't do that walk for you, but we've learned skills and awarenesses that will help each of us return in a way that our return can bear more fruit. That truly the hope and the promise that this be a transformational Camino might become more a reality in your life and amongst those that you live and love. So I want to, in my name, in Kath's name, in Jeremy's name, and in the name of Transformational Tours, I want to invite you to what I think will be a very incredible, rare, and deep experience of your truest self as we touch the truest and deepest energy of the earth, helping us transform. Buen Camino and ultreia.